Gymnastics is a sport built on the pursuit of perfection. Athletes spend years, sometimes their entire childhoods, learning to bend their bodies in ways that seem to defy what human beings are capable of. The training is relentless. The margins are razor thin. And the apparatus, the vaulting horse, the uneven bars, the high bar, offers almost no room for error. Most of the time, the falls are absorbed and the athlete gets back up. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes a single slip, a misplaced foot, an awkward landing is all it takes to turn a training session or a competition into a catastrophe. These aren't stories about recklessness or poor judgment alone. They're stories about a sport that pushes human bodies to their absolute limits and what happens when those limits are crossed. Here are 5 gymnastics deaths that left the world in horror. It was May 5, 1988, in Tokyo, Japan, during warm-ups for the vault final at the World Sports Fair. Julysa Gomez was 15 years old, and she was one of the most promising gymnasts in the United States. She had grown up in San Antonio, Texas, the older daughter of a family that sacrificed everything for her career. Her mother had been a migrant farm worker. Her father, too. By the time Julysa was 10, her parents had built a different kind of life, one stable enough to send her to train under Bela Karolyi in Houston. At the 1986 U.S. Championships, she placed 4th in the all-around in the junior division and earned a spot on the national team. By 1987, she was competing internationally, strong on the uneven bars and the balance beam, and people around the sport considered her a legitimate contender for the 1988 Olympic team. The vault, though, was a different story. Julysa had been working on the Yurchenko, a vault that requires the gymnast to do a round-off onto the springboard, a back handspring onto the horse, and then a release into a salto. It was a technically demanding sequence, and in 1988 it was still relatively new to the elite level. Observers had noticed for months that her technique was shaky. She sometimes missed the springboard with her feet entirely during practice. Her former coach, Bela Karolyi, had seen it. Teammates had seen it. Her current coach, Al Fong, had seen it too. One of her former teammates, Chell Stack, later said plainly, "You could tell it was not a safe vault for her to be doing. Someone along the way should have stopped her. No one did." The reasoning, as it was understood at the time, was that Julysa needed to keep attempting the vault in competition to score high enough to stay relevant. The difficulty was part of the value, so she kept training it, week after week, right up until that morning in Tokyo. During warm-ups before the final, she ran toward the vault. Her foot slipped off the springboard. She slammed headfirst into the vaulting horse at full speed. The impact paralyzed her from the neck down in an instant. What followed made everything worse. At a Japanese hospital, she became disconnected from her ventilator. The resulting oxygen deprivation caused severe brain damage and left her in a coma. Her family brought her home to Houston and cared for her for 3 years. She never regained consciousness. On August 8, 1991, Julysa Gomez was gone. She was 18 years old. In the aftermath, the sport was forced to reckon with what had happened. In 1989, the International Gymnastics Federation began allowing U-shaped springboard safety mats to be used during competitions, something that had previously been restricted to practice only. The 2006 Code of Points went further, making the mat mandatory for Yurchenko-style vaults and assigning an automatic score of 0 to any gymnast who performed one without it. In 2001, the old vaulting horse itself was phased out entirely and replaced by a wider, more stable vaulting table. The changes were real, and they mattered. Equipment that should have existed before 1988 finally existed after it. Rules that might have protected Julysa were written in the years that followed her death, not before. But none of it came in time for her. She had been pushed toward a skill she couldn't yet control by a system that valued competitive scores over the safety of a 15-year-old girl, and that system only changed after she paid the full price for it. It was 1989 at an international gymnastics meet when a judge pulled Christy Henrich aside and told her she was too fat and needed to lose weight if she wanted to make the Olympic team. Christy was 16 years old. She had been training at the Great American Gymnastics Express Club in Blue Springs, Missouri, under coach Al Fong, the same man who had been working with Julysa Gomez. Christy made the U.S. national team in 1986 after placing 5th in the junior division at the national championships. She placed 9th at the 1988 Olympic trials. By 1989, she had won the silver medal in the all-around at the U.S. National Championships and helped the American team place 4th at the World Championships in Stuttgart. She was on an upward path, and the results showed it. But elite gymnastics in that era had a very specific image of what the ideal athlete looked like. The sport was dominated by what people inside it called pixies, small and prepubescent-looking girls whose bodies fit a mold that the judges rewarded. Christy, at a healthy weight for her frame, didn't conform to that image. Her own coach had reportedly made comments about her size and body type on multiple occasions. And then came the judge's remark at that 1989 meet, blunt and without apology. She was too heavy, and she needed to do something about it. Christy took it to heart. She started restricting what she ate, quietly at first, in a way that didn't show up in her results right away. She tied for second on uneven bars at the 1990 U.S. National Championships, which looked from the outside like progress. But behind that result, her body was already in serious trouble. The restriction had turned into anorexia nervosa, and the disorder tightened its grip month by month in ways that neither her coaches nor her family could break through. By early 1991, she wasn't strong enough to train at the level the sport demanded. She left the club and retired from gymnastics in January of that year. She was 18. What followed were years of hospitalizations, treatment programs, and a weight that kept dropping no matter what the people around her tried. At her lowest recorded point, she weighed 47 pounds. On July 26, 1994, Christy Henrich was gone. Multiple organ failure. She was 22 years old. What her death did was force a conversation that the sport had spent years avoiding. Other gymnasts came forward publicly, including Kathy Rigby and Kathy Johnson, two well-known names in American gymnastics, both of whom admitted they had struggled with disordered eating during their own careers. More current national team members spoke out as well. The weight of it, collectively, was hard to dismiss. Television networks that had been broadcasting gymnastics competitions, including NBC and ABC, stopped listing gymnasts' weights in on-screen captions, a practice that had been routine. Educational programs on nutrition were introduced at both the national and international levels, though their reach and effectiveness varied. The reforms were real. They were also arriving more than 5 years after a judge had stood in front of a 16-year-old girl and told her that her body was the problem. The cruelty of Christy Henrich's story isn't just the ending, it's the whole structure of it. She was doing exactly what the sport asked of her. She trained hard, competed at the highest level, and then, when someone in authority told her she needed to change her body to keep climbing, she tried to do that too. The sport demanded it. She obeyed, and the demand killed her. There was no recklessness here, no moment of poor judgment. There was only a young woman who believed the people telling her what she needed to do in a system that was willing to let her. It was July 1998 in New York City during the Goodwill Games. Sang Lan was 17 years old, and she was warming up for the vault event final. She had grown up in Ningbo in eastern China, picked for a sports school at age 5 because she had long legs and a petite frame. By the time she was a teenager, she was one of the country's strongest vaulters. She placed second on the event at the 1995 Chinese Nationals and won the vault championship in 1997. She competed at the American Cup in both 1996 and 1997. She had never represented China at the Olympics or at a World Championships, but she was only 17, and those things were still ahead of her. The future, as far as anyone could see, was open. What happened during warm-ups that day was not a dangerous, high-difficulty attempt. It was a timer, which is a stripped-down, simplified version of a vault that gymnasts use to get comfortable with the apparatus before attempting their full skill. There's no complex twist, no difficult release. It's a basic run, push off, land. Sang had done it hundreds of times, probably thousands. She pushed off the springboard. Something went wrong in the air. She came down headfirst onto the mat. The impact fractured her cervical spine, the bones in her lower neck. She couldn't lift herself from the mat. She was taken to Nassau University Medical Center, a level 1 trauma center in the New York area, where surgeons performed spinal realignment and cervical fusion. The damage to the spinal cord itself was too extensive to undo. She was paralyzed from the mid-chest down. Sang spent nearly a year in New York, receiving rehabilitation at Mount Sinai Hospital. Celebrities made their way to her bedside. Celine Dion came. Leonardo DiCaprio came. Christopher Reeve, who had been living with his own spinal cord injury for 3 years by that point, came to sit with her. At the New Year's Eve celebration in Times Square as 1998 turned into 1999, she was invited as an honored guest. When she returned to China, she was received as a symbol of national resilience. A television miniseries was produced about her life. She enrolled at Peking University in 2002. She became a disability advocate, carried the Olympic torch for the 2008 Beijing Games, and built a public identity around surviving what had happened to her. From the outside, her story had the shape of recovery. But years later, Sang told a different version of what had actually caused the fall. She said that while she was in midair during her vault, a coach from another team walked into the vault area and removed a mat, breaking her concentration at the exact moment she needed it most. She said she reported it at the time, but Chinese officials dismissed what she told them. In 2011, she filed a lawsuit in federal court in Manhattan, naming dozens of parties including the Goodwill Games organization, USA Gymnastics, and the Chinese-American couple who had served as her guardians during her time in New York. The suit alleged, among other things, that promises made about her medical care had been broken, and that her account of the fall had been deliberately suppressed. The lawsuit drew sharp and divided reactions in China, where she had spent more than a decade as a symbol of grace under suffering. Some supported her for speaking up. Others accused her of ingratitude. What her filing made plain was that the public story of Sang Lan, the smiling, resilient athlete who made peace with her injury, had always been incomplete. Sang Lan lived with her paralysis for more than 2 decades. Reports from 2021 indicated she had passed away from complications tied to her injuries, though full details of her death were not widely confirmed at the time. She was 39 years old. A routine warm-up on an ordinary afternoon in New York had taken the rest of her life. It was Friday, November 8, 2019, at New Era Gymnastics in Hamden, Connecticut. Melanie Coleman was 20 years old, a junior at Southern Connecticut State University, and she was in the middle of a routine training session. Not a championship, not a qualifier. A practice, the kind she had attended 4 or 5 days a week for most of her life, at a gym she had known since she was a child. Melanie had grown up in Milford, Connecticut, and gymnastics had been the fixed point around which everything else in her life moved. She had trained at New Era for nearly a decade under coach Tom Alberti. Her older sister Tiffany had trained there too, and the two had become teammates at Southern Connecticut State. At Jonathan Law High School, Melanie had been an all-state selection and team captain. She had reached level 10, the highest level in the USA Junior Olympics program. At university, she had been named a Women's Collegiate Gymnastics Association Scholastic All-American. She was also studying nursing, following her sisters into the field, building a future that extended well past the gym floor. Her mother, Susan Coleman, described a household of 7 who had spent every day together for 2 decades. Melanie had also volunteered at New Era, teaching younger gymnasts the same skills she had been learning since she was a girl. Her name was already on a banner inside the building before that Friday session began. During practice, she slipped from the uneven bars. The exact sequence of how it happened was not immediately known. University spokesman Patrick Dilger said the precise cause and circumstances had not yet been determined, though he confirmed that coaches were present and acting as spotters, that all protocols had been followed, and that the facility met the highest available safety standards. Coach Tom Alberti, who had known Melanie for nearly 10 years, was among the first to reach her. A Southern Connecticut State coach certified in CPR began providing aid before medics arrived. The fall had caused a severe spinal cord injury. Melanie was taken to Yale New Haven Hospital. 2 days later, on Sunday, November 10th, 2019, she was gone. "We're going to leave an empty space in our photos for her," her mother said. The gymnastics community responded with grief that spread far beyond southern Connecticut. Tributes came from coaches, teammates, and athletes who had never met her but recognized exactly what it meant to practice on the same bars, on the same mats, trusting the repetition to stay safe. Her former high school principal said she kept coming back after graduation to work with younger athletes. Her coach said she gave every ounce of energy, every session. Those words, said in grief, were also plainly true of what she had been doing on the afternoon of November 8th. She showed up, as she always had, and the gym gave her nothing back. What set Melanie Coleman's death apart from others in this account was the absence of any exceptional circumstance surrounding it. There was no technically demanding skill being pushed against a gymnast's limits, no external pressure of an approaching competition, no institutional failure waiting to be uncovered. She was doing what collegiate gymnasts do on an unremarkable Friday afternoon, in a facility that everyone agreed was properly run, with coaches present who responded immediately. The bars don't always telegraph what's coming. A slip is a slip, and the distance from the bar to the mat is the same whether it's the first time you've ever stood in a gym or the 10,000th. That is precisely what made it so hard for the people who loved her to absorb. Gymnastics carries inherent risk at every level, from the elite programs chasing Olympic qualification to the college gym where a 20-year-old nursing student practices between classes. The sport doesn't reserve its worst moments for its highest stakes days. Sometimes it takes someone on an ordinary afternoon in a gym full of people who would have done anything to stop it, and there is simply nothing left to explain. It was September 2024 at the Burtasy Sports Palace in Penza, Russia. Now Takir Albari was 19 years old, and he was 3 weeks into a national team training camp that was supposed to be the final preparation before the most important competition of his life. He had arrived in Penza on September 1st alongside 4 other Indonesian gymnasts and 2 coaches. The group had come to Russia specifically to sharpen their readiness for the 2024 Artistic Gymnastics World Championships, scheduled to begin the following month. That detail mattered in a particular way. Albari was considered a strong candidate to qualify for the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. The path being mapped out for him was unusually clear. Perform well at Worlds, build on that, reach Los Angeles. The people around him could see it. He could see it. The camp in Penza was simply the next step towards something that already felt real. 3 months before the camp began, he had made his major international debut at the Asian Championships in South Korea, competing on floor exercise and pommel horse. It was June 2024. He was 19. The debut went well enough that the people around him believed he was ready for the next step. Then, while training on the high bar, he attempted a complex element and came down wrong into the foam pit. The landing was awkward in the specific, catastrophic way that gymnastics sometimes produces, where what looks from the outside like an imprecise moment is, for the body taking the impact. A violent collision with a surface that stops everything at once. The fall caused a severe neck injury. He was transported to G.A. Zakarin Hospital in Penza and placed in intensive care. For 12 days, the Indonesian gymnastics community held on. The federation posted updates as they came. His teammates and coaches, still in Penza, stayed with him and waited. Back in Indonesia, the Gymnastics Federation relayed what information it had to a country that had been following the story since the first reports came out of Russia. The broader gymnastics world waited too, holding on to the fact that he was still alive, because that much was still true. He didn't recover. On September 25, 2024, Now Takir Albari was gone. The Russian Gymnastics Federation confirmed it had conducted an investigation. Vasily Titov, the federation's vice president, stated that all the circumstances surrounding the injury had been established, and added that the athlete had not been prepared to perform the element he attempted. That finding, stated plainly in a brief public comment, sat heavily with the people who had followed Albari's career. He had been building toward something. The conclusion that he had moved beyond his preparation was not comfort. It was a line of explanation that explained very little about the weight of what was lost. Ita Juliati, the president of Gymnastics Indonesia, put it plainly. Naufal was a talented young athlete and a good person, she said. Indonesian gymnastics has lost one of the nation's finest. This is a deep blow and sorrow for us. The World Championships went ahead as planned in October. The Indonesian Federation stated publicly that they intended to honor Albari's memory throughout the competition, that the venue where they had hoped to watch him perform would carry something of him regardless. The event proceeded under a weight that the schedule had not accounted for, and that no amount of planning could have softened. Albari made his international debut in June 2024. He was gone by September. 4 months separated his first major competition from the last day of his life. He had trained for years to stand on a world stage, and the sport took him in a foam pit in Russia before he ever got there. 5 athletes, 5 countries, 5 decades of the same sport, asking the same thing of the people who chose it, and taking more than it had any right to take. None of these deaths were inevitable. That's the part that stays with you. The vaulting horse that crushed Julysa Gomez was replaced by a safer apparatus 13 years later. The culture that starved Christy Henrich prompted policies that took years to implement and decades to actually reach the athletes who needed them. The questions that Sanglan raised about what happened on that warm-up mat in New York were suppressed for over a decade before she raised them herself in court. Melanie Coleman's death produced grief and tributes, and the bars she slipped from are still in gyms everywhere, being used every day. Rules changed, equipment changed. Conversations that should have happened years earlier finally happened, but only after someone was gone. The cost of each lesson was a life, and the sport kept being taught.